It's good to see you all here today, and we get to work together to work on this project. So I'm really glad for our time. For our agenda today, we are going to look at some videos, just short for a minute, about the Interstate Bridge and people's thoughts related to it. Our program administrator, Greg Johnson, is going to give us some updates and Q&A. We're also going to do a community engagement update. And then we're going to dig in on our EAG, our equity advisory group screening criteria. So thinking about what is the equity screening criteria going to look like? What is it? Why is it? How does it operate? How would it operate? More about our equity framework and our equity lens. And then public comment. So we have some good brainstorming and information sharing, and I hope that you all are comfortable and ready to go. So I'm gonna turn. We have a few things to read. So if I can have next slide. We have closed captions in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window, ibr.news/captions. Next slide. How to access closed captions. At the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. Click on the CC closed caption icon and a separate window with captions will appear. Next slide. Participation points, tips. Thanks for joining us today. Please join audio by either phone or computer, not both. We encourage panelists to turn on your video. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. Please say your name when you begin to speak. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. Next, public input instructions. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To submit input after the meeting, email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. Call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. Next. All right. So we are going to watch a short clip from videos that have been made of people talking about their connection to this bridge.
Hopefully the sound works. It seems like we always have some sort of issue, but.
I've been writing public transportation since I was 8.
Was that playing sound?
Yes, but it was low.
It was very low? Okay.
My family, and my mom doesn't know how to drive. And
can you make it bigger, Jay?
Great question. Let me, hold on. I'm gonna go to the actual YouTube video. Bear with me. This, I thought this might happen.
It'll work better that way. It'll be great.
play the Jeopardy music for you, Jake. No pressure.
So Jake, if you need some time, I can begin my update.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, well, let's talk about what has happened in the last month since we have met. So we have talked to members of the bi-state ledge. It wasn't a full meeting, but we've had conversations with the bi-state legislative group, and we put before them our schedule to reach an IBR solution. So these next 8 months through the remainder of the summer, the fall, and winter, the IBR program is going to be digging into the data to answer several of the key questions to move this program forward. So one of the first questions, and probably the most controversial, is we will be putting forward an IBR solution for high capacity transit. What will that look like? Will it be bus rapid transit? Will it be light rail? So, or a combination of both. So those are some of the questions and data that we're going to dig into, and the models that we're going to put forward. We're going to be coming back with these proposed answers to the EAG to make sure that what we are doing is once again centered in equity. So other questions will be the number of lanes that go across the bridge. We know now that there are 3 general purpose lanes, both north and south of our program area. So more than likely we will have 3 general purpose lanes, but the key question is how many auxiliary lanes to move traffic between the closely spaced interchange will occur. So once again, a very controversial issue. Some people want to see 0. Some people want to see numerous. So, but we will be driven by data and our modeling. The third question is, will there be an interchange on from I-5 to Hayden Island? And right now, that's the only way to access the island. But as we are looking at the reconstruction of the Marine Drive interchange, we're looking at, should there be a local bridge to provide access to Hayden Island, or should Hayden Island continue to be served directly off of I-5? The fourth question is, it seems straightforward or mundane, but it's very important about how the program will move forward, and that's whether we will replace the North Portland Harbor Bridge that connects the southern portion of Hayden Island to mainland Portland. So it was projected before that we would just do a seismic retrofit on that bridge, but that was 15 years ago. So is that still a viable solution? So those 4 primary questions, along with a number of other sub-questions, will get answered, and that will compromise the IBR solution. That will be what we will put forward to you guys, to the community advisory group, to the executive steering group, and eventually to the bi-state legislative group. So that was the conversation we've been having with the different groups to get them up to speed on the direction the program is going. So you will see us be tremendously busy. We may ask some of you to come with us to bi-state ledge to talk about your experience, and as we are taking these decisions through the process, informing the bi-state ledge of what your experience has been and how the program is moving forward in the equity space. We also had our principal climate officer put put forward the vision for what climate will look like and the nexus between climate and equity. So it was very well received presentation. And once again, we will have those conversations throughout the program. I believe we are scheduled to have our principal climate officer, Sarah Auger, come to this group, not this go round, but sometime later in the fall or late summer. So other than that, we are collecting data. We are putting a plan together to analyze that data. So Jake, it looks like you might be ready.
I am, and then when we're done with the video, I can go back for your ESG and CAG updates if that works.
Okay.
Awesome.
I've been riding public transportation since I was 8. I'm from a low-income family, and my mom doesn't know how to drive. And a car is also a big luxury for us, so she always taught me, use your resources, and the bus was my biggest resource, my lifeline.
Is that playing?
It has stopped. It was playing great.
It was playing, and you could hear the sound?
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Hi, my name is Elvia. I was born and raised here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a college student, and public transportation is my thing. My experience using the bridge. Well, I can definitely say it's a huge struggle. Why does it have to take so long? I could be doing so many other things, but instead I'm in a bus zoning out for a while. Time to me is something super precious, and I feel like it's slipping through my hands every time I have to cross that bridge, and it sucks. The bridge has always meant connection. I get to meet so many different types of people, and it's really cool. If it were to be replaced, I would hope that it would create faster and more accessible public transportation options, because that would literally give me back so much time, and I think it would be just super impactful to the communities that rely on public transportation between these two great cities.
All right, so we just wanted to share that. That's Elvia. She's actually someone who works on the program, but and then uses the bridge. We wanted to share that because it's a series that our community engagement and communications team is doing to get people their personal stories of how this project impacts them. So now I'll pull the slide deck back up.
Hi, all right. So should we pass back to Greg to continue?
Okay. So once again, last week we had our executive steering group meeting.
A car is also.
And once again, we talked about, we shared the climate framework, which Sarah will be coming back to this group to talk about how that will continue to be revised throughout the program, and how climate will be inextricably linked to equity. So we also brought forth the community advisory group, community values and priorities that they approved at their last meeting. And so the executive steering group was well received that document. And once again, there were words of praise and no questioning of how it was arrived at. So it was a consensus process that got us there, and they recognize that. So once again, we talked about the iterative progress on the IBR program. So some folks have expressed concern about how we will move design options forward along with screening criteria. And what it will be, and we showed you a diagram a few months back of a spinning circle where once again, we will put input in, it will go through a number of cycles, and we will put more input in. It will go through another cycle, and then we will spit out a design option that meets equity, that meets climate, and that meets other important goals that the program is setting forward. So we look at this as an iterative process over these upcoming number of months, and the screening criteria will be applied to help modify design options as we move forward, as well as we will be putting performance measures as well as program outcomes together based on what this group, what the community advisory group and the executive steering group tell us about our design options. So some of the design options are going to be the big questions. They're going to be, okay, here is the mode that scores out technically the highest. Is it equitable? Is it does it meet climate goals for the region? So all of those things are going to be questions that we're going to be bringing back to you as the equity advisory group for your input. Next slide, please. So once again, our community advisory group was earlier in the month. We spoke to them about the design options and gave them a graphic. And I call it our Jenga graphic. If you've ever played the game with the wooden pegs where you pull one out and you insert another one in. So our design options are the Jenga pieces. We're going to be inserting different options based on the changes that have occurred over the last 10 years. And we're going to come up with a IBR solution that will be based on those changes and based on some of the good work that was done in the prior program. So it will be unique. It will not be a regurgitation of what was done before, because we know there's a number of changes that have occurred. So we also, our co-chairs will be talking to each individual community advisory group member to hear their feedback and their experience, to make sure, once again, that their voice is being heard. And once again, the next meeting of the CAG is going to be in early August, August 5th. The climate framework and the equity framework will be introduced to that group. So once again, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of good information that's being shared, and we're going to be in the thick of things over the next 9 months with the stated goal of taking this IBR solution to the bi-state legislative group for their approval to move it on to our federal partners for the reevaluation that has to occur. So with that, I will take any questions that the group may have. I'm sure somebody has a question. I will chalk it up to, boy, I did a great job of explaining that. Well, once again, I will be here for the entire meeting. So if a question does come to your mind, I will be here to hopefully provide you feedback and an answer to any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Matt has something for us.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, I just had a quick question for you. So you mentioned that the performance measures were introduced to the community advisory group. Are those going to be covered in any more detail for us, and when can we expect to do that?
Yeah, the performance measures are closely tied to developing of the design options and screening criteria. So some performance measures, and this is going to be, some things will be developed early, but this will be a continuum of things that we hear and things that we have to react to. The performance measures are going to be how we measure our success in meeting the goals that we have set. So for instance, a performance measure may be how many DBE or what percentage of DBE firms are contracted. And it's not a question we can answer today in full, but it will be something that we will have a public dashboard where folks can see and measure to see if we are performing up to what we said we were going to do. Because one of the things we said we were going to do is bring DBE firms, women-owned, minority-owned firms to this program in a significant way. So we're going to set performance measures around that, measure it, and report it out. So you will hear more of that conversation from Angela Finley at upcoming meetings. Her team is helping to drive that issue along with the screening criteria.
And just to build upon that, exactly what Greg said, the EAG will be deeply engaged in helping to develop performance measures. It's on our work plan. Once we make our way through the screening criteria, that's going to be first on the deck. You'll recall this body has had preliminary discussions relative to the performance measures, and it was important for us to develop the screening prior to the performance measures. But we'll be spending a fair amount of time in late summer, in the fall, on performance measures.
Those will be the things by which we are held accountable. So it's tremendously important.
Thanks for answering my questions.
Other questions or concerns?
Hi, Greg. This is the other Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Matt Hines. How you doing? So I have a couple observations, things that I wanted to share. I think that first off, that story from the video was great, and I think that's a good encapsulation of what the bridge means. I just want to make sure that if we show that video in the future, that video is not only captioned but audio described. I obviously can't see it, so I don't know exactly what's happening in the video, and other people who can't see it might not know what's happening in between the dialogue as well. The second piece is, and this has also been shared kind of in the preliminary discussions, but I think there's a lot of concern within the EAG about the time frame that the project is on, and being sensitive to that, but also understanding that developing performance outcomes, and screening criteria can take quite a bit of time, especially since it is so informative to our process. So can you kind of lay out, I guess, any, what your thoughts are on any concerns that we might be moving kind of too fast into this when we really need to kind of be very focused on developing these outcomes and criterias for our design options?
Well, Matt, it's a great question, and we have a base that we are stepping from. We are not starting at ground zero, and I would agree, if we were starting with none of the information we already have from the previous study, yeah, this would be awfully fast. But there's been information that has been developed. We know there's only so many ways you can cross this river at this location. So there are certain things that are given that we don't have to go back and recreate. So that saves us time as we move forward. Our commitment as a team is not to skip any steps. We're gonna move at a good pace to assure that the folks who have given us the charge to get this done, that we meet the goals that they have set for us. But my pushback to them and my assurance to you is that we're not going to skip any steps. If there is time, if folks need us to take a step back and look at some of the work we've done, we'll do that. If there's more time needed to develop design options or screening criteria, we're not going to rush the project, but we do have to set timetables. And once again, I don't know if you guys heard that Secretary or USDOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg was in Oregon last week and was discussing, the infrastructure conversation that's going on in Washington, D.C. We cannot afford to be left out of that conversation. We have to demonstrate that, number one, we are worthy of being in the conversation to attract funding to come to this program. And number two, we have to show that we are moving this program in a way that will be ready to receive funds and begin construction on a schedule that is reasonable for folks in Washington, D.C. to say, yeah, these guys are serious and they're ready to receive federal dollars. So it's a push-pull. It's a very much recognize that we don't want to run too fast to where we've left folks behind. But we also need to move in a way that provides surety that we're going to get this thing done in a reasonable time frame. So Matt, I hope that answered your question, but the commitment is that we're not going to skip any steps. And to me, that's the critical part.
Thanks, Greg. I think having some of that initial background information will really help us with shaping those conversations. To have that foundational knowledge might help us feel a little bit better about the timeline. Thank you for your answer.
John?
No, I just would agree with that. I think we have a lot to build off of from the previous community conversations that happened about this project. And I would love to see some of specifically the equity conversations or the community conversations so we can leverage that and honor the work that's come before and build off of that. So I appreciate what Greg said and I agree. We just it'd be great to have that context.
All right. I think let's move on for now. And if people have other questions for Greg, please bring them forward. We have him here, so let's make the most of that. All right. I'm going to pass it now to Lisa Schauer, who's going to give us a community engagement update. And I haven't seen Lisa in a while, so I'm excited for that.
Good evening. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and it's always great to see you, Dr. Roberta. I have a bit of an update to share with you from the community engagement perspective, which also includes the community advisory group that Janelle and I co-facilitate. And there's been some really good comments relative to Greg's update that I think we'll want to also build off of. So if you could go to the next slide, Jake. We, as a community advisory group, as Greg mentioned, moved forward with articulating community values and priorities. So unlike the EAG that has some really good work around defining the equity framework and the definition of equity, the community advisory group's kind of work plan is really around how the community's values and priorities are reflected in how the program moves forward. And that's the work that this group has been really focused on. That includes developing the draft values and priorities that was a culmination of community listening session feedback, feedback from our big community engagement efforts that happened in February but have not stopped, but were fairly intense in terms of the outreach and the online survey and the conversations that surrounded that online survey. The community advisory group meeting feedback from this group, and then individual community advisory group member meeting feedback. So we were able to reach consensus with the community advisory group on June 3rd with this 2-page community values and priorities document. Some of those themes that we thought were important to just share with this group was, first and foremost, those community values and priorities that will be used to develop the screening criteria and the performance measures. Really focus first and foremost on centering equity, advancing opportunities to reduce impacts from and improve resiliency to global climate change, ensuring the availability of transportation choices, creating opportunities for economic empowerment, cost effectiveness and fiscal responsibility, and congestion impacts for all users. So these community values and priorities really are shaping how that screening criteria and performance measures are developed by the technical teams. Additional community values include natural, cultural, and historic resources that should be protected and enhanced, cooperation between bi-state program partners, and meaningful, equitable, and transparent community engagement. So I think that, one of the questions that Matt asked was around kind of that performance measures and that interaction with the community advisory group. The presentation to the community advisory group was really around how we utilize the work that was done to define the community values and priorities as it begins to start to develop for the technical teams in the program, the actual performance measures. We have yet to see those performance measures, but that's the foreshadowing that's beginning to happen within the program by that technical experts that you'll talk to a little bit later in the program. As we look at how it shapes those program impacts, how does centering equity in the program's process and outcomes? What is the result of that commitment? How are we improving resiliency to climate change? How do we foster leadership and cooperation between bi-state partners? And how do we provide meaningful, equitable, and transparent community engagement? Those are the program outcomes that flow from the community values and priorities into the program outcomes. Also, we're looking at providing all modes of transportation to increase capacity as part of what those performance measures need to define and be able to hold the program accountable, and contributing to economic empowerment. Those different areas of community values and priorities really kind of fall in different subheadings: the shaping the program outcomes, the identifying performance measures, and then the last piece that really kind of brings over our community values and priorities into the actual design and data analysis is the screening criteria. And some of those community values and priorities that will be utilized in the screening criteria include reducing congestion, providing access to and ensuring availability of transportation choices, and the protecting and enhancing the natural environment. So as the community advisory group has really tried to define and reflect what we're hearing from the community are those values and priorities, we're also trying to draw some through lines. How do those values and priorities impact program outcomes? performance measures, and screening criteria. So similar to the equity advisory group, the community advisory group is interested in seeing the details that we're able to see in action as this program continues to move forward. As I mentioned, our community engagement doesn't just stop in one period of the program timeline. It's an ongoing effort. And so as we wrapped up kind of that intense effort in February, as we were really trying to ensure that we'd heard community values and priorities, we then pivoted into very topical listening sessions where we had 217 participants between April and June, focused on providing input around multimodal commuter experience, Hayden Island and Marine Drive, freight movement, downtown Vancouver, active transportation, and sustainability and climate. So we tried to make sure that we were covering specific topics that the community may be interested in sharing their feedback. All of the feedback has been summarized and is available on our website. So if you're interested in hearing a little more about what happened at each of those listening sessions, that's all available and accessible to you on our website. A few of the key elements that we heard in those listening sessions included reducing congestions, a top priority, improving active transportation and public transit options while ensuring safe and reliable access in an equitable manner, unimpaired freight movement through the I-5 corridor, which supports local, regional, and national community needs, embodying the sustainability best practices and acting as an example of other transportation projects that we aspire to emulate, and then really truly building a bridge that will help unite the community while minimizing negative impacts. So we heard very similar feedback that we have been hearing throughout all of our community engagement. And we're not done. We have another series of upcoming community listening sessions. And these are really focused to ensure that we're reaching those that this equity advisory group have defined as those communities of concern. And so this is really being led by, we're pretty proud of the integration between the equity team and the communications team and the community engagement work. And it's being co-led by the equity and communications group. And so we're reaching out to people with disabilities, BIPOC, houseless individuals and families, older adults, and then very specific language outreach and listening sessions. These are really just an opportunity for the community to ask questions, to feel like they have the opportunity to be able to provide input, and for the program to continue to listen. So we're continuing to want to make sure that our community understands how we're moving forward and how they can engage with us. And then I also just wanted to wrap up with a little bit of a call to action. So you did see the video of the bridge story from Elvia. We need some more of those stories. We really are looking for real life examples of what this bridge means to our community. So if you have ideas, please reach out. And I just want to also say that if there are outreach opportunities, organizations that you think that we should be reaching out to, please don't hesitate to let us know. You have lots of access to the equity team, and certainly please feel free to always feel like you can reach out to me. We're open and we're listening, and we want to make sure that we're reaching as many members of the community as early as possible so their feedback can impact how the program moves forward. So with that, certainly would take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Matt.
Yeah, this is Matt Sears from Disability Rights Oregon. Just a quick question, Lisa. What's the can this information about the community engagement sessions on like August 4th or August 17th, is this all available on the website?
It is, and sometimes having a deadline like a public meeting helps to make sure we get everything all set up. So that should all be live, but we did solidify all of those dates today. So any help in trying to reach other individuals from your community-based organization, we would love to partner with you. And if these dates don't work, we're happy to offer another session too, Matt.
Yeah, no problem with the date. I was just curious. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Great. Any other questions for Lisa? Meg.
Hi, this is Meg Johnson. I just had a quick question about how you're reaching out to all of the individuals for the next listening sessions. What's been your mode to get in contact with the people you want to hear from?
A lot of grassroots. So we're trying to utilize social media and specific groups, Facebook groups that we have access to. We're also reaching out to our community-based organizations to ask them to help us spread the word. And we have multicultural liaisons that work within the community. So for instance, ERCO is an organization that we've worked with that helps us with our materials translation, but they're also deeply embedded in our community and helping us to ensure that we're reaching language specific audiences. So I would say there's lots of different ways. We're certainly not limited to just one way of pushing out information, and we're open to any suggestions. So if you see a place where you think, gosh, we need to make sure that we're there, let us know.
And just to add to that, if I may, we could really use all of your help ongoingly to ensure that we're reaching out. Of course, as a program, we're going to do the best we can, but we really need all of your help to ensure really that we're approaching this in a holistic fashion. That's especially true for the working groups that we're standing up, wanting to make sure we have this equity definition, that our working groups and our outreach is reflective of the diversity of this region. And so we need your help. We're going to be deploying sort of ways to do that, one of which is to provide support to organizations, financial support, to help make it easier to engage us. We understand that, you know, it's inappropriate for us to be asking for expertise for free. And we are, of course, providing gift cards to folks as well for their participation. So we're open to all ideas and efforts, and we'd love to work with all of you to help make sure that our outreach is really reflective of this group's direction to the program.
Masha?
To build on that, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Lisa, carry on.
I was just going to say, to build on that, I thought you were headed in a direction, Janelle, to also mention that we are launching a mini grant program, because we do think that it is so critically important to invest in those organizations that are helping us. So kind of two paths forward. One is individuals, we want to compensate them for their time and their input, and then also organizations, we want to do the same thing as well. So we're just in the process of launching that program, but pretty excited to find ways to really recognize the contribution.
Masha?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, this is Masha. I work at ERCO actually, and I was just going to second what Janelle was saying and also what you were saying, Lisa. If you ever have any material, I'd be happy to receive, you know, anything from you. I work in community development, so we can forward that to our different centers, organizational centers, and then advisory councils who are leaders in the community who can spread the word, and then try to bring people to those sessions, the multilingual sessions. So yeah, I'd be happy to receive any information to pass it on to our community members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's pass to Jake for now, and we'll talk about the screening criteria.
Thanks, Roberta. So this is Jake. So we had, I mentioned this briefly in an email. We formed the subgroup of this advisory group to focus in on screening criteria and performance measures as we're going through this design process. So we met last Wednesday, and I came to them with this full kind of menu of all these screening criteria. And by them, I mean Matt Hines, Sabrina, and Lily. And by the way, Lily was going to make it tonight, but she couldn't, and so she was going to do this report out. What we heard clearly from that group is they need a better understanding, and this full committee needs a better understanding of just what we're talking about when we're talking about design options. Greg mentioned some earlier, but we wanted to really give some more depth, create some more space around that. So we've invited a couple of our folks on the program team who can speak to this in more detail. And so I'll pass it to Alex Prentice, who is going to give kind of that overview. I'll pull up the slides for you, Alex.
Thanks, Jake. So my name is Alex Prentice. I am with the IBR program team, and I work across a bunch of different disciplines. And I also just wanted to thank you. This is my first time at the Equity Advisory Group on camera. I'm usually just a listener, so thank you for having me and my colleague Ryan LaProuse, who's our transportation planning manager. As Jake mentioned earlier, we are getting to a point where we are finally starting to hit the ground running, I guess. And so we are developing screening criteria, as Jake said, that are then going to be used to evaluate different design options. So what does it mean when we say design options? So let's go and look at the process a little bit of how we get there. Next slide, please. So a lot of you have probably seen this slide before. It shows the trajectory of 2004 all the way to 2025 and beyond. So previous planning efforts concluded in 2014, and we're now between 2019 and 2024, we're in a planning and environmental stage. And right smack in the middle of it, we are here. Actually, we're pretty early in it. We are here. We are striving towards getting to an IBR solution. By IBR solution, we mean it's going to be a design that will then be submitted for reevaluation by our federal partners and our partner agencies. So that would be, there are certain choices that have to be made to get to that solution. And that's what we're working towards right now. Next slide, please. As Greg alluded to earlier, though, we have done some major work in trying to figure out how to get there, how to get to this IBR solution. We don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of work to be done, and there are some major decisions that need to be made. So we've set for ourselves a fixed point in the sky, the North Star, to guide us as we develop this IBR solution. So these targets are one integrated program that includes a new river crossing over the Columbia River, high capacity transit, interchange improvements, and active transportation improvements. Another target is to identify and advance a single IBR alternative by the end of 2021. That's the IBR solution. Our other target is to go through the NEPA process with a goal to achieve path 2 or 3, which is a supplemental environmental impact statement. So what this means is that we are trying to keep this program within the bounds of previous planning efforts without having to restart. We want to use all of the good work that has been done to continue design and screening now. Our other target is that we're going to be evaluating high capacity transit options. There are going to be multiple options within that. Another target is that we are going to replace the North Portland Harbor I-5 bridge. And lastly, our goal is to begin construction no later than 2025. Next slide, please. So this is our backbone slide, as we are calling it. Again, this takes us from 2004 all the way through 2025. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to zero in on 2021 and 2022, which is where we are right now, where we're doing all of this huge work with you, with partner agencies, and with our design team to develop design options that can then be screened and developed into the IBR solution. So right now we are in the middle of obtaining the data that is going to be used for screening. So that might look anything like Ryan will help me out on the exact data, and Jake, like he said, presented a menu of different screening criteria which rely on data to evaluate. We're also in the middle of identifying design and transit options and then developing those design and transit options. We're also looking at the screening criteria. The goal is that once we've developed all of these transit options, we will have an opportunity to then screen them to make sure that they fit in with our values. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, Ryan, do you want to put up the PDF? We're going to run through a map now of showing you exactly where we're going to be making different design choices. We have some major decisions that need to be made before we can move forward with the IBR solution. We've parsed them into 3 separate categories here: the transit options, the roadway, and the active transportation. And what this particular map is showing is the transit options major decisions. So the major decisions are the mode, the alignment, station locations, termini, park and ride locations and size, and any off-site improvements. So it's really important to know that this is not a complete list of the different design options. This is a preliminary list. This is a draft list of design options that will be evaluated using data and screening criteria. So how are we making choices about design options to get to an equitable, climate-friendly draft IBR solution? This is an iterative process that includes partner feedback, screening criteria, data, and then design refinement. And the goal is at each of these locations is we're going to have one design option chosen by the end of this year to go into the IBR solution. Ryan, do you want to run through those?
Yes, I'll do that. So I'll kind of go through the call out boxes here. As Greg kind of mentioned, he teed up some of the design options, some of these major modes, and Alex just went through. So we've got 3 slides. The first one here is the transit major decisions. So we got HCT integration at the Expo Center. That's where the current end of the line, the yellow line is. We're looking at mode and alignment across. This is the North Portland Harbor. How do we get from the mainland Portland to Hayden Island? So we're looking at mode, kind of station. Will there be a station on Hayden Island, etc. We'll look at I-5 to Hayden Island bus routing. What's the best routing for some of those local buses to get on and off of Hayden Island? You'll see kind of HCT mode again, looking at kind of LRT, dedicated LRT system, dedicated BRT system, or a surface running bus option will be looked at. We'll be determining the HCT terminus. Where would that be? One of the major questions. We'll look at routing into downtown Vancouver. Where both
Ryan?
buses. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Do you
That's
think
okay.
you could you zoom in some?
Sure
It's
can.
hard to follow. Yeah, thank you.
Is that good? Thank you. I will zoom in. So perfect. Thank you, Caitlin. So again, we'll be looking at bus routing or high capacity transit routing into and out of downtown Vancouver from I-5. We'll be looking at HCT integration on the downtown Vancouver streets with the existing Vine, the Mill Plain Vine, the 4th Plain Vine routing, as well as the future planned 99th Street Vine routing in downtown Vancouver. We'll look at kind of park and ride locations and sizes. Where would they be? So this is kind of the transit modal questions. I'll next slide to our roadway major decisions. So this is another slide. So we've got interchange locations and layouts will be a major decision. We're getting into the limits of the local street improvements. We're looking at bridge configuration and height for the bridge. And then as Greg mentioned earlier today, the number of auxiliary lanes on the system. So again, looking at the map, we've got kind of local roadway circulation routes and connections through Bridgeton, Expo area of Marine Drive, as well as on Hayden Island. We'll look at kind of the local arterial bridge between Hayden Island and mainland Portland. We're looking at replacing the North Portland Harbor Bridge, as Alex mentioned, as one of the North Star targets. Interchange options on Hayden Island will be a partial interchange, a full interchange, or maybe no interchange with local access, providing that access to the freeway. Again, number of lanes highlighted here. We've got the structure alignment and configuration, and then Main Street connection, excuse me, in downtown Vancouver. There's kind of Main Street's one of the routes. Kind of stops at kind of the ramp terminal today with SR14. They're looking at extending that down to the waterfront. For Main Street.
Ryan?
Yep.
Sorry, this is Alex. Just one question. Could you explain why some things have check marks next to them?
I will. So we've heard from kind of partner feedback, as Alex was mentioning when we were discussing. We've got lots of feedback going on with partner groups, EAG, CAG. So we heard loud and clear from some of our partners at the City of Vancouver that they would like to maintain the Main Street connection. That was part of the previous planning effort. That was looked at earlier. So those got a check mark. So a few of that ones, North Portland Harbor Bridge, replacing North Portland Harbor Bridge also has a check mark, as that's one of our targets moving forward. And some of these other ones, we still have decisions to be made. So like mill plane interchange, fourth plane interchange configuration as well. So those are two of the slides. And then the last major design category to discuss today is kind of active transportation. So the major decisions are the connections and the alignment for that active transportation system. So we're looking at connections and how it combines in with the existing kind of trail system, routing system that's kind of already out there that exists today, as well as it's planned in the future. We'll be looking at direct routes for regional users versus local connections. A good example of that's on Hayden Island. You know, we got the through active transportation users that are trying to go across the bridge. You got others that are trying to use the local system and access Hayden Island, for example. And then we've got a few more connections here on the north side in Vancouver. We're looking at the shared use path connection of the waterfront. Again, that was part of the previous planning effort and would like to be maintained. So we got a check mark by that one. And then the community connector in downtown Vancouver was part of the previous planning as well and like to be maintained through partner feedback.
Ryan, would you mind explaining what that community connector is?
I will give it my best shot, Jay. Thank you. So it's going to connect across the freeway system, kind of like a lid system, and it would combine access to both sides of the freeway and have kind of park and routing facilities across the freeway system in like a lid configuration. It was planned on Evergreen, kind of just south of Evergreen Boulevard, as where it was previously planned, and the city would like to maintain that east-west connection across the freeway. I think there'll be, that's kind of the main decisions we're looking at kind of through our refinement process. Greg kind of led us into this earlier, and these are a summary for you guys. I gotta get through that.
And it's really important to note that these are the major decisions that are going to be taking us to December. This is not the end of all of the decisions that need to be made by any means. We are going to have over the next 4 years so many opportunities to shape this project. So when we say that there's going to be a shared use connection to the waterfront, that's just saying that there's going to be a connection. It doesn't necessarily dictate what that connection is going to look like, how it's going to run. So it's really the high level decisions that are going to be made now. And then through the process of refinement, working with you, working with partners, working with community, that's when we'll get into what exactly is this going to look like on the ground. If you're using this shared use path, what is it going to look like? We're not going to know that for quite some time, but we do know that we're going to make sure that there's a connection to the downtown Vancouver waterfront. So I think that's all that we have in terms of presenting the design options that we're currently looking at from the perspective of screening criteria and data. So I know that this is a lot of information and it's fairly technical. So we invite any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Alex and Ryan. And real quickly, before questions, just wanted to, so the connection there is we have all these screening criteria that are focused on how we advance equity and how we determine between different options what kind of has the best potential to advance our equity outcomes. So this is really what we're looking at. If it was kind of fuzzy, maybe it still is fuzzy, hopefully less fuzzy than it was before, but just to better inform this group of what we're talking about.
That's a really good point, Jake. And yes, thank you for reminding us that a lot of what we're going to be looking at these major decisions for is their contributions to how they perform in equity and climate. So that's going to be a really critical part of this decision-making process.
Meg and then Sabrina.
Hi, this is Meg Johnson. For the slides that you were just showing, the PDF specifically, for any of those, were they considered to have information on pedestrian or non-car related roadways systems, or any kind of walking or non-walking person connections there, not just cars?
Yes, that last slide was about active transportation and connections. So that was kind of summarizing some of the major key topical areas that we want to focus active transportation decisions on.
And Ryan, how would you define active transportation? Walking, biking, rolling?
Yes, all of the above.
Okay,
Yes.
and a shared use path would be dedicated to non-motorized as well, or non-vehicle?
Correct.
So anything on the SUP, that's shared use path, that would be considered. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Sorry about that. Didn't clarify that. Thank you.
Well, that's okay. I appreciate it.
Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina with Metro. Just a clarifying question on the process. So we are using screening criteria to evaluate design options versus using screening criteria to develop design options. Is that right?
It's a really, really iterative process. We are constantly struggling with the chicken and the egg here of what comes first. And the fact is that there's really no comes first. The screening criteria that we're developing are going to be used to further refine the design options. And the design options are going to be going back and referring to the screening criteria and the data that we're looking at. Greg, do you want to?
Yeah, just one other quick comment. There is a limited universe of options. And we're going to put in work on those options. And as the screening criteria refines and defines better those options, we will be changing those to accommodate where the screening criteria takes us. But there's only so many ways to cross a bridge, or cross a river rather. So we know what most of those are. Now there may be some out of the box ideas that come out of this group that will lead us to a new design option. But we've got a pretty sharp team that's thinking through these things. So we're going to put a number of things up as we develop screening criteria, and once again go through that circle of iterative processes to refine and come out with the best design option, and eventually the IBR solution.
Thank you.
So if there aren't more questions, or if you're still thinking of them, I can talk briefly about next steps. So the subgroup is going to meet again. We're going to return to the list, the menu of screening criteria, and take more. Hopefully, with this will help to kind of inform all of our thinking, including that subgroup. And then at the next meeting, we will bring back a more kind of refined list of what that subgroup would like to put up to this group for consideration and refinement, and then go from there and hopefully end up with a final recommendation from this group as far as the screening criteria that are most relevant to equity.
Jake, could you just say again who's on the subgroup?
Yeah, and we are open to others joining. There's Sabrina, Matt Hines, and Lily.
And they are defining, they are kind of drafting ideas around the screening criteria.
Yeah, we have a list of them that we developed based on previous meetings with this group and previous conversations, as well as some work with the technical teams. And so there's some draft criteria, but we need to go through them, be like, did we hit the mark? Are there things that we can refine about these to make them more meaningful? Yeah, just basically improving upon the early draft that we have.
Great. I really appreciate having a visual and an explanation being talked through it as we think about the screening criteria, because it does feel a lot more tangible now than it's ever felt. On that note, I feel like it's time for Chris Lepe. So Chris, if you will bring in the equity framework.
Sounds good. So hey everybody, Chris Lepe here on the IBR equity team, assisting with the development of the equity framework. And today I'm going to provide you with a reminder of the key elements and outline of the framework and an update on the schedule of its implementation. As you're very familiar by now, the framework is a blueprint for the equitable planning and implementation of the IBR program. And the key elements of the framework, as you can see right here, consist of the equity definition and objectives, which we have already developed, the measures of success, and putting the framework into action. And so both of those last elements, the measures of success and putting into action, which is more sort of the implementation piece, are currently in development right now. So for the next slide, we're going to provide you here a little bit of an updated schedule for the development of the framework. This month, we're confirming the framework outline and sort of the framework structure and narrative, and then also discussing the first draft of screening criteria and the equity lens. Next month, we will refine the screening criteria and refine and approve the equity lens. And also you'll have a first look at the draft equity framework structure and narrative. And then in September, we will finalize the screening criteria and discuss the second draft equity framework. Lastly, in October, we will discuss the first draft of the program's performance measures and discuss and vote on the final equity framework structure and narrative. On to the next slide, please. As those of you who were at the last meeting know, the framework will consist of this context setting background information, and that includes the purpose of the framework, the historic context, the program purpose and definition, and the arc of the planning process, including where we are, the program and planning environmental stage, and where we're going, the design and construction phases. Next slide, please. So importantly, the framework will lay out what we want to achieve, how we will achieve it, and how we will know if we're going to achieve it or we have achieved it. And this includes the equity definition and high-level objectives, indicators of success, and the strategies, actions, and activities. Next slide.
So it looks like Caitlin might have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Chris, could you, on the slide that talked about the timeline over the next few months, I was just wondering, I appreciated how it shows we're seeing first draft and then it comes back to see refined and second draft and finalizing. But to the point that was clarified by Alex and Greg that Sabrina raised and asked about how the screening criteria is both being used to evaluate and also hopefully help inform and develop design options. I'm wondering if we could be more intentional about integrating into here updates on, because there's technical work happening and design options being developed concurrently, kind of reporting out on how like that real-time iterative process is happening each month.
Yep, that's a great point, Caitlin, understanding that, you know, we're operating in a moving system, other pieces to the hydraulics, and point well taken. And the thing I'll say about the schedule, as Greg indicated, is the goal is to be making forward motion without skipping steps, and so it's the old adage, planning is everything, plans are nothing. And so this is the plan with the understanding that you may need to alter it as we go. So point well taken, and we'll integrate that feedback.
Thank you so much.
Right on. And so the last piece, so we spoke about, or I laid out sort of the context setting, background information, what we want to achieve, how we will achieve it, how we will know we've achieved it, and then finally, the last section is developing a series of products and tools to help us reach our equity objectives. And these include the equity lens, which you will be discussing in a few minutes, the screening criteria and performance measures, which have been a part of the discussion today, the equity index, and also mitigation and equity enhancement commitments. Since our last EAG meeting, we've been focused on developing the draft equity lens and screening criteria, and that's the bulk of what we're asking you to weigh in on today. As I mentioned, the equity lens and screening criteria will receive more discussion at our next meeting, and we plan on convening 2 subcommittee meetings before our next EAG meeting to help us create more forward movement or momentum on these 2 products before we meet again as a large group. And we'll be following up with you to request volunteers. This includes my update. Thank you for your attention. And I'll now pass it on to Janelle for a dive into the draft equity lens.
Thank you.
Real quick, just wanted to clarify if you're wondering if equity index, so that is essentially the kind of data-based tool that looks at the demographics around the program area, kind of layers the communities that we identified in our equity definition to see kind of where those priority areas that we should be looking at, especially when we're thinking about screening the design options and establishing performance measures. So,
and on that point, you'll recall that Jake presented that preliminary information at our last meeting. You'll get further sort of review of that. And so I think the point that is important about this particular slide are a couple of things. One of which is, we are attempting to integrate equity in a number of different ways, as you can see. It's not just one particular way in which we're conceiving, how do you integrate equity into a project of this size. And so we're thinking through a number of ways to ensure that we actually achieve the equitable outcomes. The other important thing to note is, sometimes we can kind of get lost in the words. And as we think about the equity framework, it's really an equity blueprint, if you will. And critical elements of that blueprint are the products here. So that the equity lens, the screening criteria, the equity index, the performance measures, which, as Greg indicated, is going to be the way in which we hold ourselves accountable to actually building a bridge that meets our equitable outcomes and dashboarding that out and making sure that it's meeting our stated objectives. And then the conversations around, and some of this may result in, for example, a community benefits agreement or whatever those eventual elements might be. It's both the environmental justice side of the mitigations, but also whatever the commitments that we need to see in this project, that's going to live here as well. So really important work, but it's important to note that we are making progress on the equity framework. It's, we've accomplished the definition and we're working on these other elements. So just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the equity lens. And first, just for some grounding, let me first just thank all of the regional partners. We've been studying a great deal, all of the equity lens that have been developed in our region. Many of the government agencies and community-based organizations are developing them and gave us a lot of fodder to pull from. And so as we get into the questions, I should note that a lot of the questions that we've developed and we'll be talking about in the small groups were questions that we directly got from the EAG. These are questions that you all have provided to us over the course of our time together. But in reminding ourselves what is a lens, the goal is to inform the program's approach to achieving equitable outcomes. Really at the core, it's about embedding equity throughout ongoing decision-making and actions by IBR program. And to really ensure that when we're making key decisions and when we're at key decision points, that will be made over the arc of the project, that we're stopping and pondering the equity implications. Lens questions guides IBR program and teams towards equitable processes and outcomes. And those of you who are using them in your organization, I would really encourage you to kind of share some of that information. The other piece is that the purpose of an equity lens is to be deliberately inclusive as an organization makes decisions, and it introduces a set of questions into the decision that helps the decision makers focus on equity in both their process and outcome. It also is explicit in drawing attention to the inclusion of and the implications for historically marginalized communities. An equity lens will not tell us what actions to take. Rather, the lens helps us discuss and reflect on whether and how the action and decision-making process advances equity. And, you know, my goodness, imagine if we had an equity lens at the advent of the freeway system. Perhaps we would not have torn apart communities like Albina. So part of the goal is, as we're developing a lens, is how do we not further harm, but also how do we ensure that we are advancing the most benefit to our stated priority communities as defined by the equity definition. Next slide, please. So the big picture questions, these are questions you see in a lot of the lenses, and you'll see these sort of interwoven in ours, is what decision is being made, who is at the table. That gets to the community engagement piece that Lisa talked about earlier, right? Making sure that we are actually inclusive in who we are inviting around the table. And if in fact it's difficult for folks to be around our table, then we need to come up with solutions by which we remove those barriers. How are decisions being made? Being really transparent about our decision-making process. What assumptions are at the foundation of the issue? And then what is the likely impact, right? Really thinking through what is the eventual impact of our decisions. And so really important as we start to think about screening criteria and performance measures, what are the potential impacts, both positively and potentially negatively, on our priority communities as defined by our equity definition. Another way to think about an equity lens is both a formal tool. Multnomah County talks about it as a transformative quality improvement tool used to improve planning, decision-making, and resource allocation, leading to more racially equitable policies and programs. It's also a general informal tool, a general mindset. Are we considering how communities of concern might be impacted? Also, the equity advisory group, the questions that you all are asking is in fact another sort of equity lens, right? The probing questions, the way in which our program teams come before you and you consider and critique some of the information, which is why this body is so critically important. Next slide, please. The way in which we'll be operationalizing the tool, both will be at the programmatic level. We know we have the EAG, the CAG, and the ESG, but also at our program team level. And so here are the teams that we have internally working on this project. We have media and public involvement. We have environmental team. You've spent a lot of time with our environmental team. We have transportation planning. We have design engineering. We have structures. We have transit, financial, project controls. And so part of the exercise, once we come up with the list of questions that we feel meet our sort of equity outcomes, will be to deploy those questions within our structure to ensure that we are asking these questions at critical times. Next slide, please. As you'll recall, we have as a program 6 overarching equity objectives: mobility and accessibility, physical design, community benefits, economic opportunity, decision-making process, and avoiding further harm. And so these are the objectives by which we are using to inform the lens. You'll see as we kind of go into our next section, we have categorized the lens questions based upon our overarching equity objectives, such that we are getting to the core of what our equity objectives are. Next slide, please. Next slide.
So John, the next is the discussion questions. Do we want to pull up the Word document with the questions?
Yeah, if you want to pull that up, and then I want to just read quickly the questions and how are we doing with time? I know we've been presenting a lot. We're eager to get your feedback next.
Okay, it's 6:52. And we're doing okay for time.
Okay. Jake, are you going to pull that up? Okay, so what this is describing is we have the equity objectives on the left column that I indicated that connects directly to each of the objectives. And then on the right-hand side, we have draft equity lens questions. And in our small groups, what we're going to be asking you is to ponder the questions that we have here, to critique them, and to make sure that we are getting the questions right. In some instances, you may actually want to consolidate, you may want to add. What I will suggest is, this is an imperfect process. Our goal is to not get the perfect questions. Our goal is to get the right types of questions, knowing that it's an iterative process. What's important is that we're socializing these types of questions within the IBR team. Not necessarily that we have the perfect set of questions, okay? And so, Jake, if you can go to the questions that we're going to ask the EAG to ponder in small groups.
And you should have received in the email from this morning that Word document with those draft questions. So you'll want to pull that up for these discussions.
So there'll be 3 small groups. I'll facilitate a group, Jake will facilitate a group, and Dr. Hunt will facilitate a group. And so in small groups, we want you to answer the following questions. The first is, what do you like about the draft equity lens questions? The second is, what improvements would you like made to the questions, as well as what's missing? And then the third and final is, how would you like to see the equity lens used? Again, we're not asking to tackle, to solve how we're going to operationalize it tonight, but we are curious, and this could be based on your own experience within your various organizations or in the community. How would you like to see us use the equity lens? Okay. So with that, I want us to go ahead and jump to small groups so that we can hear your feedback.
And just want to verify, everyone, this is Brent. How long do you want the group to be? Right now it's set at 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think 20 minutes is good. Dr. Hunt, does that make sense?
That might be a little too long.
Okay.
I think if we did 15, then it leaves 5 minutes for discussion.
Okay, 15 minutes it is,
okay.
And we'll open all rooms now. And Jake, you were saying something?
No.
Okay. Opening the rooms now. Thank you, everybody.
And if you could just give us a warning, like a warning, a 5 minute warning or something like that before you cut us out.
We'll do, John, now.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Catherine, they're in a breakout room right now and they'll be back in like a minute. Otherwise, I would have put you in the breakout room.
Oh, no worries. I'm transporting kiddos, so I had to log off for a little while.
All right. Thanks for joining back in. Appreciate it.
Sure. Yep.
And Catherine, I'm putting up on the screen what questions they are discussing in the small group, just so you have some context.
Okay. Did that.
Hey, Brent. Hey, Brent.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, no, it's fine. We have, how many people do we have in public comment?
There's no one signed up. I was putting the public comment slides up so that hopefully if someone did want to provide it, they would.
If we don't have per public comment, could you send us back into our groups for 5 minutes?
Yeah, right now we don't have public comment, so.
I should probably put up that slide, right?
I did put up the public comment slide.
Oh, great.
So transparent facilitation, what I'm proposing is that we don't report out because we do have things collected. If we can have 5 more minutes in our how about 7 more minutes in our small groups and come back, see if somebody's here to talk. If they are, great. And if they aren't, then we do something else. Okay?
Right. Are you able to send us back to the same groups, Brent?
I am. Yep.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right. Recreating those now.
Awesome.
And welcome to the public. At this point, if you would like to give a public comment, we are receiving those via phone. So please dial 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 986-0940-5983 with a passcode of 701-3 376. And again, the phone number is 669-900-6833 with a meeting ID of 986-0940-5983 with a passcode of 701376. You'll be in a queue at first, and then will be admitted to the meeting, and then we will ask you to unmute. It is *6 to unmute yourself. And if you are wanting to give public comment, we just ask that you provide your name and your affiliation, and we have 2 minutes to speak. So appreciate you being here tonight, and hopefully we get to hear from you. If not, there is provide public comment after the meeting. You can fill out the comment form on the program website, which is interstatebridge.org, or you can email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. Alternatively, you can call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say EAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to EAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. So thank you for joining, and hopefully with all the options you can provide your public input. And John L, there's still no one in line for public comment tonight.
Okay, terrific. Other folks still on the way, looks like. Okay. Oh.
Yep.
Wonderful.
You're joining now.
Okay, great. Do we have friends to speak to us today?
Not tonight.
All right, great. Well, where are we going next? Jake?
Well, if we don't have public comment, then we can either wrap up, or if folks want to share a couple thoughts from the discussion, we've got a couple minutes.
Yeah, I think a little report out would be good for the group's edification.
Yeah, great. Steve, share with us some of your thinking.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Caitlin, for putting me on the hot seat. First of all, here's what we discussed. We all came together on the same plane, but we first wanted to be clear about what problem is this program going to solve first, whether it's technical, the technical side, and how does that technical side of the problem that the bridge seeks to solve factor in the intersectional challenges that people face. So if I'm a person with disability and we're talking about accessibility, how does that technical problem solve for the bridge address my disability, one, to access whatever mode of transportation that will be created? Because currently, for example, we have kids with disabilities or seniors with disabilities that have to take 3 buses. Does that technical problem solving of the bridge solve that intersectional kind of nature that folks are experiencing? Then how do we use our equity criteria as an evaluation for reflective thinking, so that once the design is being thought, people are asking themselves not the surface question of, well, we are just solving for interchange and idling, but how do you factor in the human kind of impacts that decision will make? And then you can actually come back to your ideas of who will be at the table to help you think beyond your surface answers. Hopefully I've captured what folks were saying.
That was perfect, Stephen.
Others?
So I would say that, yes, we were asking the right questions, because when we said we want to look closely at who that demographics are in those areas, and then that would tell you if it's the group of people who are disabled, if it is low income people, as we heard the young lady who had no transportation. So I think we were saying that so far what we saw from the questions were good.
I think one kind of key takeaway that I got from our group was that the concern is, what's the technical problem that people are trying to solve, and how does that address the needs of people? And so as we think about people, we think about we also think about animals, and we think about the environment around that. But the technical, we're trying to build this bridge, but for people who need to utilize it in their multiple identities, how are they able to do so? And have we made transit as sexy as possible?
And just to give a little report out on our group, generally what we heard was that folks like the questions and that they attempt to clarify that as a program, we're not just looking to check the box, that questions capture sort of the essence of what we're aiming to achieve relative to our priority communities, that the questions really center the community, that it's really a community centric approach. In terms of improvements, really a lot just in terms of how will the questions be operationalized, that we need to be clear about who will be asking these questions and ultimately who is responsible for them. Having a clear path of how this tool will be used, that we need to be transparent with the community relative to it. And then how will, to the question of how will we like the equity lens used, We had some discussion that it should be used in open discussion with IBR teams. How do we start to socialize these questions within the IBR team or teams plural? We would like to see the lens used on every critical decision and implement it in each of the programmatic areas, sort of the micro level, is what we heard.
I thought my group had some great conversation. Would anyone like from my group to share a thought or two? All right, I will. I think a couple of the points I'm really walking away from is there needed to be some more specificity in some of the wording. We have some really broad questions in there. And so if we really want to know how to answer those, we need to provide, really put some more meat on those bones. And then there was talk about having something that John mentioned was, as we're talking about like the communities that we're considering, and one of the was vulnerable communities, we should specify that, we're wanting the communities that are in our equity definition. If we're looking at key destinations, like what are those key destinations that we're wanting to make sure we're considering? And we talked a lot about the physical design, and really that objective itself is kind of tricky. It's not that specific right now, not that clear to everyone, myself included, of how we really integrate equity into physical design. What does integrating equity, what does integrating mean there? So I think we have some work to do there. But all in all, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, group, it sounded like there was support for at least what we've got started to move forward with.
Great. Very brilliant people around the room. I want to have us wrap up. We have 4 minutes left. So three takeaways from our time together today.
I have a takeaway.
John.
Sorry, let me turn my camera on as I'm sweating in my little office. No, Jake was right on. It was what a great start. I thought, and Meg said something right at the end. I wish she could have shared that. It was a really good way of crystallizing it. But it's so much. I mean, you guys have done a ton of work, and I mean, I'm going to be leveraging this across other things, but this is not easy, and I think we can really build on it. So I'm pretty excited about what you put together, Jake and the team. And there's a lot here that we got to unpack, but it's great to have something to start with. So I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. 2 more, quick. Meg.
Hi, this is Meg. More than anything, I think the discussion about how the screening criteria and the performance measures are going to go hand in hand with the design elements, and they're going to talk to each other while they're all happening. I think that's a really nice concept that I didn't have before. I didn't know which one was first, and it's good to know that they're working together, but it would be great to have that consistently be checked up on. I would love to make sure that those questions are being asked while the design is happening, and hearing about it as often as possible.
1 more.
I'll say thank you to Jonelle and his team for the work that they're doing and the questions that they came up with. They're very thoughtful. So thank you for leading this effort.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do want to say, as John L mentioned, we didn't come up with all this just on our own. I mean, we a lot of these were directly pulled from past meetings that we've had with you all, as well as partner agencies. So don't give us too much credit.
Well,
just take it. Just take it, Jake. Take it, put it in your pocket, and say goodnight.
Thank you, Steve.
And on that note, so there will be a meeting evaluation poll that's going to come up. Thank you, thank you. And our future meetings, August 16th, mark your calendars, 5:30 to 7:30. We're going to talk about our first draft of the full equity framework and more on the screening criteria and this very exciting nexus of climate and equity, possibly September instead, but we're moving towards it. September 20th, 5:30 to 7:30, more about that equity framework and more finalizing of that screening criteria recommendations. So we are moving at a clip and doing well. All right, Janelle or Greg, any final things that you want to say as we close out?
Yield to Greg.
I just want to say thanks to everyone. This is not easy. This is hard work, but it is necessary work to move this program in the right direction. So thanks to all of you for your time and efforts.
Yeah, it's getting juicy. All right, thank you, friends. Enjoy your evening. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
What's up?